This slide shows the learning objectives for the today's lecture. The granulomatous lung diseases can be divided into two main groups: infectious lung diseases, in which the most important is mycobacterial infection, and then certain deep fungal infections. In the non-infectious diseases which can lead to granulomas in the lung, there are three types of conditions: immune disorder associated, then inflammatory conditions, and then certain malignancies like Hodgkin's and other certain carcinomas can lead to granulomas in the lung. Among the non-infectious diseases, the two important conditions, sarcoidosis and hypersensitivity pneumonitis, they are important causes of interstitial lung disease. Among the granulomatous infectious diseases which involve lungs, tuberculosis is the most common. You have studied this in detail in third year. I'll just briefly run through the salient features with you. It is a communicable or infectious disease characterized by chronic granulomatous inflammation with caseation necrosis, which leads to destruction of tissues and organs. Regarding the epidemiology, about 2 billion individuals are infected worldwide, with about 8 to 10 million new cases per year and about 1.5 million deaths per year. Tuberculosis flourishes in conditions of poverty, crowding, and chronic debilitating illness. Regarding etiology and routes of transmission, Mycobacterium tuberculosis hominis is responsible for most cases of pulmonary tuberculosis. Transmission is usually direct by inhalation of airborne organisms in aerosols or by exposure to contaminated excretions of infected individuals with active pulmonary tuberculous disease. Mycobacterium bovis, this is responsible for oropharyngeal and intestinal tuberculosis contracted by drinking milk contaminated with Mycobacterium bovis. Mycobacterium avium complex is much less virulent than Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and this causes disease in immunocompromised individuals. The different routes of spread of tuberculosis include local spread, lymphatic spread, hematogenous spread, and spread through the natural passages. In local spread, the Mycobacterium bacilli are transported to the surrounding tissues through the macrophages, while through the lymphatic spread, the mycobacteria are transported to the regional lymph nodes. Hematogenous spread is responsible for tuberculous bacteremia and production of miliary tuberculosis involving multiple organs. Through the natural passages, transbronchial spread to adjacent lung segments and from lung lesions into the pleura, then swallowing of infected sputum into the intestinal tract, and tuberculous salpingitis into the peritoneal cavity. According to the different organ involvement, tuberculosis can be divided or classified into three types: pulmonary tuberculosis, in which there are primary and secondary pulmonary lesions, or primary, progressive and secondary tuberculosis; then miliary TB, in which there is spread to many different organs, ultimately with pulmonary and extrapulmonary involvement; and isolated organ TB, in which different single organs like intestine, lymph nodes, bones, skin, meninges, brain, kidneys, etc. are involved individually. Now the clinical features of tuberculosis. Systemically, initially the individual may be asymptomatic. Gradually there is insidious onset of fever, night sweats, weakness and fatigability, with loss of appetite and weight loss. The pulmonary effects include productive cough, blood-stained sputum, hemoptysis, dyspnea and orthopnea. This slide shows the gross appearance of the lung tissue involved by tuberculosis. This slide reveals the microscopic or histologic appearance of tuberculosis. We can see a granuloma with Langerhans type of giant cell with surrounding cuff of lymphocytes. This slide reveals the microscopic appearance of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is a Zn stained slide. We can see that there are numerous acid-fast bacilli which are appearing as pink, and they are lying individually as well as in groups and clusters. Now we come to the fungal infections which cause granulomas in the lungs. The different fungal infections leading to granulomas in the lungs include histoplasmosis, blastomycosis, and coccidioidomycosis. First, histoplasmosis. The causative organism is Histoplasma capsulatum. It is acquired by inhalation of dust particles from soil contaminated with bird or bat droppings containing microconidia, which is the infectious form. The clinical features include fever, cough, night sweats. The clinical presentation and morphologic lesions of histoplasmosis have a striking resemblance with tuberculosis. Macrophages are the main target of infection. The exact pathogenesis is not clear. Morphologically, in the lungs there are granulomas which usually undergo caseation necrosis and coalesce to form large areas of consolidation. The granulomas may liquefy, leading to cavities. With effective treatment, fibrosis and concentric calcification occurs. The histologic differentiation from TB, sarcoidosis and coccidioidomycosis requires identification of 3 to 5 micron sized yeast forms. This slide reveals the gross and microscopic appearance of histoplasma lesions. Next is blastomycosis, caused by Blastomyces dermatitidis. It is acquired by inhalation of dust particles from soil. More prevalent in United States, Canada, Middle East, Africa and India. There are 3 clinical forms: pulmonary, disseminated and cutaneous. The pulmonary blastomycosis is characterized by abrupt illness, productive cough, fever, weight loss and night sweats. The X-rays reveal lobar consolidation with bilateral infiltrates, and the upper lobes are mostly involved. Morphologically, in normal host, there are suppurative granulomas in the lungs. In the tissues, microscopically, organism is identified as 5 to 15 micron yeast cells with thick double contoured cell walls and visible nuclei. Involvement of the skin and larynx is associated with marked epithelial hyperplasia, and it may be mistaken for carcinoma. This slide reveals the microscopic appearance of blastomycosis on H&E and silver stained slides. Next is coccidioidomycosis, caused by Coccidioides immitis. It is acquired by inhalation of spores, which result in a delayed hypersensitivity reaction. The infected arthroconidia, when ingested by macrophages, block fusion of phagosome and lysosome and resist intracellular killing. The lung lesions are characterized by fever, cough and pleuritic pains. immunocompromised individuals may develop disseminated infection, which frequently involves skin and meninges. Morphologically, the primary and secondary lung lesions are similar to granulomatous lesions of histoplasma. The macrophages are giant cells contain 20 to 60 micron in diameter thick-walled coccidioides immitis virules, often filled with small endospores. In disseminated disease, the lesions may be granulomatous, pyogenic, or mixed. This slide reveals the microscopic appearance of coccidioidomycosis. We can see some intact and ruptured spherules. Now we come to sarcoidosis. It is a non-infectious granulomatous disease involving the lung, and it is one of the important causes of restrictive lung diseases. Sarcoidosis is a systemic disease of unknown etiology characterized by non-caseating granulomas in virtually all tissues and organs. The hilar lymph nodes or the lungs are involved in almost 90% of the cases. Women are affected more frequently than men, and the blacks are affected almost 10 times more than the whites. The exact etiology of sarcoidosis is not known. Regarding pathogenesis, sarcoidosis is a disease of disordered immune regulation in genetically predisposed individuals to certain environmental agents. There is accumulation of CD4 positive T cells in the intraalveolar and interstitial regions, increased level of T cell derived cytokines like interleukin 2 and interferon gamma, which are responsible for T cell expansion and macrophage activation. Then there is increase in the levels of interleukin 8, TNF and MIP-1A, along with impaired dendritic cell function. Genetic factors also influence the pathogenesis, as there is familial and racial clustering of the cases of sarcoidosis. Virtually all organs of the body can be involved by sarcoidosis. Lungs are the common site. Lymph nodes are involved in almost all cases. Spleen and liver involved in 75% of the cases. Skin is involved in about 25% of the cases. Bone marrow involved in 20% of the cases. Other organs which are commonly involved include eyes and muscles. This slide reveals the different organs which are commonly involved in sarcoidosis. Grossly, the lungs initially appear normal. Later, 1 to 2 centimeter nodules, which may appear as consolidations on radiographs, may be seen. The lymph nodes are characteristically enlarged in almost all cases, and some of these may appear calcified. Spleen and liver are moderately enlarged. The skin involvement appears in the form of discrete subcutaneous nodules or sometimes as elevated erythematous plaques. The areas of bone marrow involvement may sometimes show focal bone resorption. This slide shows the gross appearance of some of the organs involved with sarcoidosis. Microscopically or histologically, the involved organs may show numerous non-necrotizing granulomas comprising of tightly clustered epithelioid histiocytes along with frequent multinucleated giant cells. Schwann bodies may be seen, which are laminated calcified proteinaceous concretions within the giant cells. Some of the giant cells may contain asteroid bodies. These are basically stellate inclusions within the giant cells. In this slide, the picture on the left shows the histological appearance of non-caseating or non-necrotizing granulomas of sarcoidosis, while the picture on the right side shows an asteroid body within a giant cell in a mesenteric lymph node. Hypersensitivity pneumonitis may be defined as a group of immunologically mediated interstitial disorders caused by inhaled dusts or antigens which primarily affect the alveoli. It is also known as extrinsic allergic alveolitis. Most commonly, hypersensitivity results from the inhalation of organic dust containing antigens made up of spores of thermophilic bacteria, fungi, animal proteins, or bacterial products. Numerous syndromes are described depending upon the occupation or exposure of the individual. The common ones include farmer's lung, which results from exposure to dust generated from humid, warm, newly harvested hay that permits the rapid proliferation of spores of thermophilic actinomycetes. Then pigeon breeder's lung, also known as bird fancier's disease. It is provoked by proteins from serum, excreta or feathers of birds. And finally, humidifier or air conditioner lung, which is caused by thermophilic bacteria in heated water reservoirs. Morphologically, hypersensitivity pneumonitis is characterized by interstitial pneumonitis with fibrosis around the bronchioles. In about 2/3 of the patients, there are non-caseating granulomas. If the exposure persists, then chronic fibrosis and honeycombing may occur. We have discussed the important granulomatous diseases of the respiratory system. Now we will be discussing the important vascular disorders, which include pulmonary embolism, pulmonary infarction, pulmonary hypertension, and pulmonary hemorrhagic syndromes. First, pulmonary embolism and infarction. An embolus is defined as a detached intravascular solid, liquid or gaseous mass that is carried by the blood from its point of origin to a distant site where it often causes tissue dysfunction or infarction. Infarction is defined as the death of the tissue due to prolonged severe ischemia. Most of the pulmonary artery occlusions are embolic. The pulmonary artery occlusion because of in situ thrombosis is rare, although it can occur with pulmonary hypertension, pulmonary atherosclerosis, and heart failure. Now, the source of emboli are the deep leg veins which lead to pulmonary artery occlusions. 95% of the pulmonary emboli arise from the thrombi in the deep leg veins. These thrombi are produced there usually because of deep vein thrombosis, either in bedridden cases or because of the hypercoagulable states. Pulmonary embolism and infarction usually occurs in patients with a predisposing condition that leads to increased tendency for blood clotting. It is usually seen in patients who are immobilized for prolonged periods of time or who have a hypercoagulable blood state. For example, cardiac patients, cancer patients, patients with hip fractures or with factor V Leiden or prothrombin mutations, antiphospholipid syndrome, obesity, etc. The clinical significance of pulmonary embolism and infarction depends upon the extent of pulmonary artery obstruction, size of occluded vessel or vessels, number of emboli, and overall status of the CVS. The effects of pulmonary embolism are: number 1, respiratory compromise due to non-perfused although ventilated segment, and number 2, hemodynamic compromise due to increased resistance to blood flow caused by embolic obstruction. The clinical effects of embolism and infarction depends upon the size of the embolus and the area involved. A large pulmonary embolism is one of the few causes of intestaneous death. If the patient survives a sizable embolus, the clinical symptoms may mimic myocardial infarction. Small emboli are silent or induce transient chest pain. Pulmonary infarcts usually manifest as dyspnea, tachypnea, fever, chest pain, cough, and hemoptysis. The chest X-ray initially may be normal or may show wedge-shaped infiltrate. This slide shows a large saddle embolus in the pulmonary vascular bed. Now, morphology of emboli and infarction. Large pulmonary emboli lodge in main artery or its bifurcation, which are known as saddle emboli. Smaller emboli travel into more peripheral vessels, where they may cause hemorrhage or infarction. Infarcts are usually rare because of dual blood supply and occur only in about 10% cases. Pulmonary infarction is classically hemorrhagic and in early stages appears as a red raised plaque. Red cell lysis occurs in about 48 hours. Infarcts become paler and then red-brown with hemosiderin production. With time, fibrous replacement occurs with scar formation. Histologically, the hemorrhagic area shows ischemic necrosis of the alveoli, bronchioles, and vessels. The infarcts which arise from infectious pulmonary emboli are known as septic infarcts. This slide shows a hemorrhagic pulmonary infarct. Pulmonary hypertension. It is defined as a mean pulmonary artery pressure greater than or equal to 25 mm of mercury at rest. According to WHO classification, pulmonary hypertension is divided into 5 groups. Number 1, a group of diverse disorders that all affect small pulmonary muscular arteries. Number 2, pulmonary hypertension secondary to left heart failure. Number 3, pulmonary hypertension stemming from lung parenchymal disease or hypoxemia. Number 4, chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. And number 5, pulmonary hypertension of multifactorial basis. Pathogenesis of pulmonary hypertension. As can be assessed from the classification, pulmonary hypertension has diverse causes. It is frequently associated with structural cardiopulmonary conditions that increase: number 1, pulmonary blood flow; number 2, pulmonary vascular resistance, or increase the left heart resistance to blood flow. Some of the common causes are chronic obstructive or interstitial lung diseases, which obliterate alveolar capillaries and increase resistance to blood flow. Continuing with the conditions which are important in the pathogenesis of pulmonary hypertension, some other conditions are congenital or acquired heart disease, for example mitral stenosis; recurrent thromboemboli, which reduce the functional cross-section area of the pulmonary vascular bed; then autoimmune diseases like systemic sclerosis, which involve pulmonary interstitium or vascular bed; and obstructive sleep apnea, which is associated with obesity and hypoxemia. Another important group in the pulmonary hypertension cases is those of idiopathic pulmonary hypertension. Although known as idiopathic, which means with apparently no cause, it is a misnomer, as 80% cases have a genetic basis. The first mutation discovered in the cases of familial pulmonary arterial hypertension was in bone morphogenetic protein receptor type 2 or BMPR2. Inactivating germline mutations in BMPR2 are found in 75% familial cases of pulmonary hypertension and 25% sporadic cases. Morphologically, irrespective of the cause, all forms of pulmonary hypertension are associated with medial hypertrophy of pulmonary muscular and elastic arteries, pulmonary arterial atherosclerosis, and right ventricular hypertrophy. The additional changes in some cases are plexiform lesions, which are tufts of capillary formation within the small dilated arteries. Sometimes numerous organized thrombi may be seen, which suggest recurrent pulmonary thromboemboli. This slide shows a normal pulmonary arteriole on the left and a very thickened arteriole on the right with marked medial hypertrophy. Regarding the clinical course of pulmonary hypertension, the signs symptoms in all forms of pulmonary hypertension become evident only with advanced disease. Idiopathic pulmonary hypertension occurs most often in women 20 to 40 years of age. It often progresses to severe respiratory insufficiency and decompensated cor pulmonale. The treatment includes vasodilators and lung transplantation. Next, in the pulmonary vascular disorders are diffuse pulmonary hemorrhagic syndromes. These include Goodpasture syndrome, idiopathic pulmonary hemosiderosis, and polyangiitis with granulomatosis, also known as Wegener's granulomatosis. Goodpasture syndrome is an uncommon autoimmune disease in which kidney and lung injury are caused by circulating autoantibodies. The autoantibodies are produced to collagen type 4 alpha 3 chain, and these antibodies cause basement membrane destruction in the renal glomeruli and pulmonary alveoli, leading to rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis and necrotizing hemorrhagic interstitial pneumonitis. Most cases occur in teens and 20s with male preponderance. Regarding morphology, in the lungs, focal alveolar wall necrosis with intra-alveolar hemorrhage and hemosiderin-laden macrophages. The disease presents typically with hemoptysis. Initially, the symptoms are respiratory. Soon, glomerulonephritis develops, and rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis leads to uremia. Usually, the cause of death in these cases is uremia. The treatment has drastically improved with the advent of plasmapheresis. Intensive plasmapheresis is the current treatment in these cases. Idiopathic pulmonary hemosiderosis is considered to be a disease of autoimmune nature, although the exact Idiopathic pulmonary hemosiderosis is considered to be a disease of autoimmune nature, although the exact cause is not known, but the good response of the disease to immunosuppressive agents suggests an immunologic cause. It is a rare disease of the children, although occasional cases have been reported in the adults. It is characterized by intermittent diffuse alveolar hemorrhage and clinically presents with cough and hemoptysis with anemia. Lastly, polyangiitis with granulomatosis, also known as Wegener granulomatosis. It is defined as a necrotizing vasculitis associated with a triad of number 1, necrotizing or granulomatous vasculitis of small to medium sized vessels, mostly in lungs and upper airways. Number 2, necrotizing granulomas of upper and lower respiratory tract. And number 3, glomerulonephritis. The etiology is T cell hypersensitivity to inhaled agents or microbes. Morphologically characterized by granulomas with necrosis and vasculitis. The granulomas may coalesce to form nodules that cavitate. The renal lesions include focal and segmental necrosis, which can progress to glomerulonephritis. Clinically, males more than 40 years of age are mostly affected. It has a 80% mortality within the first year if the disease is not treated, and the usual treatment is with steroids, cyclophosphamide and TNF antagonists.